My parents showed up at my apartment with a lawyer and calmly told me, "All you have to do is sign these ownership transfer papers so your sister can move in." I looked at them for a second before answering. "Then I guess our lawyers can talk to each other in court." This story is a long one, but I seriously need to get it off my chest. I'm a software engineer working in downtown Chicago. About 5 years ago, after spending years living with roommates, surviving on instant ramen, and saving every extra dollar I could, I finally had enough money for the down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment. It's not some luxury penthouse, but it's in a safe building with solid security, close to the L, and best of all, I actually own it. Over the next 2 years, I slowly turned it into a place I was proud to call home. I replaced the appliances, remodeled the bathroom, repainted every room, and even built custom shelving for my home office. Every single upgrade came from long overtime shifts, freelance work, and side projects. Nothing about it was handed to me. My younger sister, Olivia, is 22, and she's always been the favorite child. That's just how it's been for as long as I can remember. While I was juggling 2 jobs just to afford community college before transferring to a state university, Olivia received a full tuition scholarship to Northwestern, though she still borrowed money for living expenses. When I finally managed to buy my first car at 20, a beat-up Honda with over 200,000 miles on it, my parents bought her a brand new Toyota Camry for her 16th birthday. During my internship, I was renting a tiny basement apartment that had mold growing on the walls, while she was decorating an expensive dorm room my parents paid for because they said the regular dorms weren't good enough for their little princess. I'd like to say none of that bothered me. Honestly, that's not true. It did. I'm definitely bitter about it, but over the years I've learned to accept that's just how things work in my family. I've always been the responsible older brother who had to figure everything out on his own, while Olivia was the one who had everything handed to her without much effort. I never liked it, but eventually I stopped fighting it. Then last Sunday, my parents, Robert, who's 56, and Linda, who's 54, invited me over for dinner. Looking back, I should have realized something was coming the second Mom made pot roast. She only cooks my favorite meal when she wants a favor. The whole evening felt strangely formal. Olivia even showed up wearing a nice dress like we were celebrating some special occasion. We made small talk about work, the weather, and her upcoming graduation, but something felt off the entire time. Then dessert came out, and Dad cleared his throat. "Ethan," he said, "we need to talk about Olivia's graduation present." At first, I assumed they wanted me to help pay for something. Last year, I'd already chipped in $500 toward her spring break trip to Cabo because, according to my parents, family helps family. I was already trying to figure out how much money I could spare this month. Mom carefully sliced her apple pie into perfect little squares before speaking. "We've been thinking about Olivia starting her adult life," she said. "Housing is so expensive these days." "Tell me about it." I laughed, thinking about my mortgage payment. "Exactly," Dad replied. "That's why we've decided the best graduation gift would be for you to transfer ownership of your apartment to Olivia." I actually choked on my pie. Not figuratively. I mean real coughing, watery eyes, struggling to breathe. The whole embarrassing scene. When I finally caught my breath, I barely managed to ask, "I'm sorry." "What?" Mom smiled. It was that smile she always wears when she's convinced she's being completely reasonable. "Your apartment, sweetheart," she said. "You'll sign it over to Olivia. She deserves a good start in life. You're already established in your career now. You can easily buy another place." I looked around the table, honestly expecting someone to yell, "Got you!" Even though it was October instead of April, nobody laughed. Everyone just stared at me like they were waiting for me to agree. Even Olivia was nodding along as if this was the most logical idea in the world. "You want me to give Olivia my apartment?" I asked slowly. "The apartment I bought? The one I'm still making mortgage payments on?" "Yes, that apartment," Dad answered. "Don't be so dramatic. You live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. You're not even using all that space. It's wasteful." Wasteful. I couldn't believe I was hearing those words. "I use the second bedroom as my office," I reminded them. "I work from home 3 days a week." Olivia finally decided to contribute. Without even looking up from her perfectly manicured nails, she shrugged. You can just work from a coffee shop. Lots of people do that now. It's trendy. I pushed my chair back. Are all of you seriously out of your minds? I asked. Do you even understand what you're asking me to do? I have a mortgage. The deed is in my name. I've spent thousands of dollars improving this place. This isn't like giving her an old Xbox I don't use anymore. Mom instantly switched into her disappointed expression. Ethan, family helps family. When you needed a car for your internship, didn't we help you? You co-signed a loan, I reminded her. A loan that I paid back completely by myself. Every single payment. And you held that over my head for 3 years. That's different, Dad interrupted with a dismissive wave. We were teaching you responsibility. So Olivia graduates, I said, raising my voice. And she deserves to be rewarded with my apartment? The conversation completely fell apart after that. Mom started crying about how I was breaking her heart and abandoning family values. Dad accused me of being selfish and materialistic, saying I cared more about property than my own sister. Olivia complained that she had student loans to repay, conveniently leaving out the fact that she'd earned a full scholarship and those loans mostly covered the cost of living in some of Chicago's most expensive neighborhoods. Then Mom pulled out her phone. She showed me a list of studio apartment rentals. See, she said, there are plenty of places you could move into. Some of them even cost less than your current mortgage. Those apartments are in Cicero, I pointed out. That's almost an hour away from my office. Besides, they're rentals. Dad shrugged. A longer commute builds character. That was pretty rich coming from a man who spent 30 years working the exact same postal route and never had more than a 15-minute drive to work. I'd had enough. I stood up, grabbed my coat without another word, and walked straight out while they kept calling after me. Before I even reached my car, my phone started exploding with notifications. Mom texted me about how disappointed she was. Dad left multiple voicemails lecturing me about family responsibility. Even Olivia sent a message saying I was ruining what was supposed to be the happiest moment of her graduation. But here's what really bothered me. This wasn't some random idea they came up with over dinner. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe even months. Mom already had apartment listings ready to show me. Dad had clearly researched how property transfers between family members worked. Olivia wasn't surprised in the slightest. The whole dinner had been carefully planned as an ambush because they honestly believed I'd just give away the biggest accomplishment of my life simply because they demanded it. I've replayed that evening over and over in my head. Am I losing my mind? Is there some secret rule that says successful older siblings are supposed to hand over their homes to younger ones? Because I've already helped Olivia plenty over the years. I've bought her textbooks. I've paid for moving expenses. I've loaned her emergency money whenever she overspent during spring break. Apparently none of that counts anymore. Now I'm expected to literally give her the roof over my head. The part that scares me the most is knowing this probably isn't over. They're going to make me out to be the villain. I'm going to become the selfish brother who refused to help his little sister. Never mind that our parents own their house outright and have plenty of savings. Why should they sacrifice anything when they can pressure me into doing it instead? Honestly, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I love my family, but this is completely insane. Right? Please tell me I'm not a terrible person for wanting to keep the home I worked my butt off to buy. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Seriously. You guys, I honestly believed my family couldn't possibly become any more unreasonable after demanding that I hand over my apartment as Olivia's graduation present. Turns out I was completely wrong. Not just wrong. Wildly, unbelievably wrong. After reading everyone's advice, I finally sent one clear group text. I told all of them that my apartment was not, had never been, and never would become Olivia's graduation gift. Then I ended the message by saying the discussion was officially over. I even offered several graduation gifts that were actually reasonable. I told them I'd gladly pay her first month's rent, help furnish her new place, or even pitch in for a nice cruise. You know. Normal graduation presents. Their reaction came almost instantly, and it was brutal. Mom called me in tears, saying I was destroying Olivia's dreams. Dad followed up with a long email about how he and Mom had sacrificed everything for their children, only for me to repay them by spitting in their faces. Olivia took the passive-aggressive route. She started posting Instagram stories about fake family and people who forget where they came from. I ignored every bit of it. I figured they'd eventually realize I wasn't changing my mind and finally let it go. Then Thursday happened. I was working from home when I heard voices outside my apartment that sounded way too familiar. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents, Olivia, and Diane, the building manager, standing outside the vacant apartment 3 doors down. The moment I saw them, my stomach dropped. I opened my door just as Diane unlocked the empty unit. She smiled when she noticed me. "Oh, Ethan. Perfect timing. Your family mentioned their apartment hunting, so I'm showing them Unit 4B. It was just renovated. It's the same layout as yours, but it has the upgraded kitchen." Mom immediately flashed that practiced smile of hers. "Hi, sweetheart. We thought it would be helpful to compare floor plans, so we can see what would work best for Olivia." I just stood there, frozen, while they walked through the apartment. Olivia was taking pictures. Dad was asking about the square footage. Mom was testing the water pressure. They were putting on a performance for Diane, but I knew exactly what they were really doing. The second Diane left, they marched straight toward my apartment like a pack of vultures. None of them even asked if they could come inside. They simply walked past me as though the place already belonged to them. Apparently, they expected it would soon enough. Mom immediately started comparing the 2 apartments. "The kitchen in 4B is nice," she said. "But honestly, I like your backsplash better, Ethan." Then she turned toward Olivia. "And this view is much prettier. Wouldn't you love waking up to this every morning?" Olivia wandered through my apartment as if she were already planning where her furniture would go. "I'd put my desk here," she said while standing inside my home office. "And this room would make the perfect walk-in closet." "I work in here," I answered flatly. "Not after November," she replied without hesitation, as if the decision had already been made. That was it. I completely lost my patience. "Get out," I said. "All of you." "No." Dad puffed himself up like an angry rooster. "Don't you dare speak to us like that. We're trying to have a civilized conversation about this transition." "There is no transition," I shot back. "This is my home. I own it. I pay for it. What part of that don't you understand?" Mom's fake sweetness disappeared instantly. The part where you'd rather keep an extra room empty than help your own sister build a future. I didn't argue anymore. I physically guided every one of them toward the front door. Mom called me ungrateful. Dad told me I wasn't acting like his son anymore. As Olivia walked out, she snapped a few more photos and casually said she wanted to remember the layout for later. As unbelievable as that sounds, it gets worse. The next morning, Diane called me. She sounded uncomfortable. Apparently, during the apartment tour, my parents had been asking some very strange questions. Not about renting, about my apartment. They wanted to know exactly how ownership transfers between family members worked. They asked whether the HOA had restrictions on gifting a condo. They requested copies of the building bylaws. They asked what happened if HOA fees were paid late, almost like they were checking whether my account was in good standing. They even wanted to know whether they could schedule a building inspection for the new owner. Thankfully, Diane handled it professionally. She told them that every one of those things required the current owner's knowledge, participation, and written consent. She also admitted something else. She thought it was strange that people supposedly looking for a rental were asking so many questions about transferring ownership of someone else's apartment. Then she carefully asked me, "Ethan, I don't want to pry, but is everything okay? Your parents seemed much more interested in your unit than any of the available apartments." I gave her the short version of what had been happening. She looked absolutely horrified. Without me even asking, she added a note to my file stating that nobody except me had authority to make decisions regarding my apartment. She also notified the front desk not to share any information about my unit or my account with anyone else. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning of the manipulation. Within a single day, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly started calling me. Apparently, my parents had been spreading a completely different version of the story. According to them, I was selfishly hoarding resources while poor Olivia was about to become homeless after graduation. My Aunt Karen called to remind me that family wealth should be shared. My cousin Rachel texted me saying I was setting a terrible example for her children by refusing to be generous. Even my grandmother called. She sounded genuinely confused because Mom had told her I owned several properties and simply refused to let Olivia have one of them. The only person who made any sense was my Uncle David, Dad's brother. He called just to tell me my parents had completely lost their minds. Then he told me something that explained everything. This isn't even the first time they've tried something like this. He reminded me about my cousin Ryan. Years ago, after Ryan bought himself a boat, my parents spent months trying to guilt him into giving it to Dad, because Dad had always dreamed of owning one. It turned into months of family drama before they finally gave up. Hearing that made me realize this wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. So I decided to prepare for the worst. I changed my locks even though my parents never had a key. Better safe than sorry. I installed a Ring doorbell. I put a security camera facing the hallway through my front window. I saved every text message, every email, and every voicemail. I even talked to a lawyer friend. He confirmed they had absolutely no legal way to force me to transfer ownership, but he strongly advised me to continue documenting everything in case their behavior escalated. And, of course, it did. Olivia started filling her social media with posts about people who forget their success only exists because of family support. She wrote things about how truly grateful people share their blessings. She even uploaded pictures of my apartment building with captions like, "So close, yet so far." Another one read, "When your own family lets you down," followed by a broken heart emoji. Mom changed strategies. Suddenly she was suffering from stress-induced migraines and heart palpitations, all because of the conflict I'd supposedly created. Dad emailed me an article claiming that adult children who refuse to support their parents have shorter lifespans. I honestly wish I were making that up. The most frustrating part is that none of this is necessary. My parents could easily help Olivia themselves. They own a house that's completely paid off and worth around $400,000. They have retirement savings. They take 2 vacations every single year. Yet somehow their retirement money is untouchable. While my home is apparently expected to become Olivia's graduation gift. Yesterday was the final straw. Olivia texted me to say she'd already told her boyfriend's family that she was getting an amazing downtown apartment as a graduation present. Now, according to her, I was making her look like a liar. She actually blamed me for a lie that she chose to tell. At this point, I'm just exhausted. I'm angry. I'm disappointed. But one thing isn't changing. I'm not giving up my apartment. They can manufacture all the guilt, drama, and emotional manipulation they want. I'm standing my ground. If this is the hill I have to die on, then it'll be inside the apartment I bought with my own money, earned from my own job. Thanks for listening to all of this madness. Something tells me they aren't finished yet. If they decide to escalate things again, I'll be back with another update. Update 2 1 month later. At this point, I honestly need a stiff drink, a therapist. Or probably both. Definitely both. Remember when I said I couldn't imagine my family taking this any further? Yeah. I was incredibly naive. Before I get into everything that happened, let me address Olivia's graduation. Took place about 2 weeks after my last update, and in the end, I decided not to attend. I know a lot of people told me to go anyway, keep my head held high, and not let them chase me away. The truth is, I couldn't bring myself to sit there pretending we were one big happy family while they were actively trying to take my home away from me. Instead, I mailed Olivia a graduation card with a $500 check inside. That had actually been my original graduation gift before this entire apartment nightmare started. She deposited the check less than 24 hours later. No thank you. No text. No acknowledgement whatsoever. She happily took the money and moved on. That was classic Olivia. The backlash from the family came almost immediately. My phone lit up nonstop with calls, texts, and notifications. How could you skip your only sister's graduation? You're tearing this family apart. You couldn't put your selfishness aside for one day? My favorite message came from Aunt Karen. She wrote, "Everyone noticed you weren't there, and your absence spoke volumes about your character." Really? Because I'd love to know what trying to steal someone's apartment says about theirs. But all of that turned out to be just the warm-up. The real circus arrived last Saturday. I was sitting in my apartment enjoying my morning coffee when my doorbell rang around 8 o'clock. I checked the live feed from my new security camera. Standing outside were my parents, Olivia, and a man I'd never seen before wearing an expensive suit. Every instinct I had told me not to open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't help wondering what fresh insanity they had come up with this time. I opened the door but stayed in the doorway. I definitely wasn't inviting them inside. "Can I help you?" Dad stepped forward like he was about to deliver some historic speech. "Ethan, this is Mr. Peterson, our attorney. We're here to discuss transferring your apartment." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "My what?" The attorney looked like a man who desperately wished he were somewhere else. He politely held out his hand. "Mr. Carter, I'm here to assist with the property transfer your parents have arranged." I didn't shake his hand. "What property transfer?" Mom immediately slipped into her calm, patient voice. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, sweetheart. We've already had all the paperwork prepared. You simply need to sign everything, and this unpleasant situation can finally be behind us." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "May I come in? It would probably be easier to discuss this while seated." Every warning bell in my head was screaming at me, but I wanted to see just how far this insanity had gone. So I let them inside. They all settled onto my living room furniture, the same couch I'd spent months saving up to buy, while Mr. Peterson opened a large folder. Inside were actual legal documents, professionally prepared property transfer papers. They included my full legal name, Olivia's full legal name, everything. "As you can see," Mr. Peterson explained while looking down at the paperwork, "this is a straightforward ownership transfer. You would transfer full ownership of the property to Olivia Carter, with an effective date of November 1st. That gives you sufficient time to make other living arrangements." I looked at the documents. Then I looked at him. Then I looked at my completely delusional family. "And why exactly do you think I'd sign any of this?" Mr. Peterson frowned. "I was informed this was already a family agreement. Your parents told me everyone had already agreed in principle and that today's meeting was simply to finalize the paperwork. I was also told you had agreed to gift the apartment to your sister as her graduation present." I stared at him. "They forgot to mention that I've refused this multiple times? They also forgot to mention that I've repeatedly told them I will never give my apartment to Olivia?" The poor guy's expression changed several times before settling on pure discomfort. He slowly turned toward my parents. "You told me Mr. Carter had already agreed to this transfer." "He will," Dad answered confidently. "He's just being stubborn. He needs to remember his obligations to his family." Then Olivia decided to make things even worse. "I already told my roommates I'd be moving into this apartment in November. If this falls through, where am I supposed to go? Do you seriously want me to end up homeless?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You actually told people you were getting my apartment?" She rolled her eyes like I was the unreasonable one. "Mom and Dad told me it was happening. Why would I question them? This is exactly what you always do, Ethan. You make everything difficult." At that point, Mr. Peterson quietly started putting the paperwork back into his folder. "I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding. Property transfers require both parties to participate voluntarily. Without Mr. Carter's consent, these documents have absolutely no legal effect." Mom immediately burst into tears. "Ethan, please. We're only trying to help Olivia get her life started. Why are you being so cruel?" Because it's my apartment, I answered. My name is on the deed. I'm the one making the mortgage payments. I'm the one who paid for every renovation. This is my home. I honestly don't understand which part of that you're struggling with. Dad stood up and walked directly toward me until he was practically inches from my face. Family helps family. If you can't understand something that simple, then maybe you don't belong in this family anymore. I looked him straight in the eyes. Then I guess I don't. The room instantly fell silent. Even Mom stopped crying. Olivia just stared at me with her mouth hanging open. I honestly think that, up until that exact moment, they still believed I'd eventually give in. I pointed toward the front door. Get out. Every single one of you. And don't come back. Dad's face turned bright red. You ungrateful. Out. They left. But they certainly didn't leave quietly. Mom sobbed dramatically about her broken heart. Dad muttered under his breath about disowning me. Olivia loudly declared that I was dead to her. As Mr. Peterson walked out, he quietly apologized. Then he handed me his business card. He suggested that, if my family continued behaving this way, I should seriously consider hiring my own attorney. That happened last week. Since then, I've taken every precaution I can think of. I upgraded my security system. I changed my locks again. Maybe it's paranoid. But I'd rather be paranoid than careless. I installed additional cameras covering every approach to my front door. I gave Diane and the building security staff recent photos of my parents and Olivia. They've all been instructed that none of them are allowed inside unless I personally approve it. I also hired my own lawyer. After my parents showed up at my workplace, he immediately sent them a cease and desist letter. Yes, they actually came to my office. Monday morning, I was walking into the building when I found them waiting in the lobby. Thankfully, security wouldn't allow them upstairs because access requires employee badges. Still, they caused enough of a disturbance that my manager later asked if everything was okay. The harassment hasn't stopped there. Now I'm getting messages from relatives I haven't spoken to since I was 10 years old. According to them, I'm destroying the family. I've abandoned my values. I'm selfish. The version of the story my parents are spreading is unbelievable. Apparently, I'm some wealthy millionaire who owns several properties and refuses to help his struggling little sister. The truth that I'm just a single guy with one apartment and a mortgage doesn't fit the story they're trying to sell. The only bright spot through all of this has been Uncle David. He called again and filled me in on even more family history. Turns out this kind of behavior isn't new at all. My parents once spent months trying to pressure my cousin Ryan into giving Dad his boat. They tried convincing Aunt Laura to let them use her vacation cabin indefinitely. They pressured my grandmother to rewrite her will so Olivia would inherit more than the other grandchildren. They even talked my late Uncle Daniel into co-signing loans that he eventually had to pay himself. David didn't sugarcoat it. They're leeches, he told me. They find whoever in the family is doing well, and then they latch on. He paused for a second before adding one final piece of advice. Don't give them an inch, kid. I'm serious. Stand your ground. The newest twist in this whole nightmare is almost unbelievable. I found out from another cousin that my parents have been telling everyone I'm mentally unstable. According to them, some mysterious girlfriend has manipulated me into turning against the family. The funny part? I'm completely single. They're actually telling people I need an intervention. An intervention, because I refused to give away my apartment. At this point, I finally started seeing a therapist. During my first few sessions, I explained everything that had happened. The farther I got into the story, the wider her eyes became. At one point, she actually asked whether she could eventually use my situation as an anonymous case study, with every identifying detail changed, of course. She told me it was one of the clearest examples she'd ever seen of narcissistic family dynamics mixed with financial abuse. Honestly, I'm exhausted. I'm emotionally drained. Some days I even catch myself thinking about selling the apartment just so my parents can never have it. After all, they can't steal something that no longer belongs to me. But then I remind myself, why should I be the one giving up my home simply because they're acting irrationally? For now, I'm staying put. I'm sitting in my apartment, drinking a bottle of wine that I paid for with money I earned myself, wondering how I somehow became the villain in a story that never should have existed. Hashtag final update, 3 months after my original post. This is it. The last chapter of this unbelievable mess. If you're reading this, you might want to grab a drink first. Trust me, after my previous update, everything suddenly went quiet. No texts, no phone calls, no surprise visits, nothing. It lasted for about 2 weeks. Looking back, I should have realized they were planning something. It was the calm before the storm. Then one afternoon, Olivia called me. Not a text message. Not through another family member. She called me herself. And she was crying. Real crying. Not the fake, dramatic tears I'd watched her use for years. She begged me to meet her. She kept saying it was urgent. She apologized over and over. Against the advice of my lawyer. Against the advice of my therapist. And against every ounce of common sense I possessed. I agreed to meet her at a public cafe. The second I saw her, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted. Dark circles hung under her eyes. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in days. She was wearing old sweatpants instead of the polished, perfectly dressed princess I'd always known. She sat down. Then she completely fell apart. Ethan. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything. I just waited for whatever was coming next. My parents. They're in serious trouble. They're about to lose the house. The moment she said that, I figured I'd finally reached the manipulation I'd been expecting all along. But then she kept talking, and what she said genuinely stunned me. A year ago, they took out a second mortgage on the house. They invested almost all of it into some cryptocurrency scheme Uncle Kevin convinced them to join. They lost everything. Almost $200,000. I stared at her. You're kidding. She slowly shook her head. Then she pulled out her phone. She showed me photographs she'd secretly taken of documents lying around their house. Bank notices. Foreclosure warnings. Legal paperwork. Everything. That's why they wanted your apartment, she whispered. They thought that if you transferred it to me, they could either move in with me or convince me to sell it and hand them the money. I just sat there in complete silence. She wiped away more tears. They finally admitted it to me last week after I asked why they were so obsessed with your apartment. I looked at her. And you just went along with all of it? She nodded. I know. I've been awful. I've spent my entire life getting everything I wanted. When Mom and Dad said you'd give me your apartment, I believed them. I expected it. She looked down at the table. I'm 22 years old, Ethan. And I honestly expected my own brother to hand me his home simply because our parents told him to. What kind of person does that make me? I didn't answer. Neither of us needed me to. We already knew. Then she took a deep breath. There's something else. They've been lying to everyone. They've convinced the family you're secretly rich. They've been telling people you own investment properties. Aunt Karen thinks you own 3 apartment buildings. Grandma thinks you're some wealthy landlord with dozens of tenants. They invented this whole story so everyone would think taking your apartment was reasonable. I leaned back. Why tell me all this now? Because next week they're coming. They're organizing what they're calling a family intervention. But it's really just an attempt to pressure you into signing the apartment over. She explained that they planned to bring nearly the entire family. Even Uncle Kevin. Apparently, he was bringing a lawyer friend who supposedly knew how to speed up family property transfers. They honestly think if enough people surround you, you'll finally give in. Hearing that made me sick. My own parents were organizing a crowd to pressure me into surrendering my home. Olivia reached across the table. She stopped just short of touching my hand. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I've been spoiled my whole life. But you're still my brother. And this isn't right. I just wanted to warn you. 2 days later, things got even worse. My parents showed up at my workplace again. This time they brought reinforcements. Uncle Kevin, Aunt Karen, 3 cousins. They told building security there was a family emergency. They caused such a massive disturbance that security ended up calling the police. I had to leave an important client meeting just to deal with the chaos. Standing in the lobby of my office building, right in front of coworkers and clients, my father screamed that I was forcing them into homelessness while I enjoyed a life of luxury. My mother dramatically collapsed onto the floor, claiming she was having chest pains. Aunt Karen kept shouting about family values while calling me a disgrace. Eventually, the police arrived and escorted everyone away. But the damage had already been done. Later that afternoon, Human Resources called me into a meeting. My boss was supportive. Still, he made it clear that incidents like this couldn't keep happening at work. I was completely humiliated. That evening, I made my decision. I called Uncle David. He gave me the contact information for his attorney. The very next day, I filed for a restraining order against both of my parents. I submitted every piece of evidence I'd collected. The texts, the emails, the voicemails, the workplace incidents. Their attempt to trick me with fake property transfer paperwork. Everything. After several weeks of filing paperwork and gathering evidence, the hearing finally took place. My parents arrived with their own lawyer. Apparently, Uncle Kevin paid for him. Their entire argument was that I was an ungrateful son who had abandoned his family during their time of need. The judge wasn't convinced for even a second. The moment he reviewed the property transfer documents and heard how they brought an attorney to my apartment to pressure me into signing, his expression completely changed. He immediately granted the restraining order. My parents are now prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me. My apartment, or my workplace. The courtroom erupted. Mom started screaming that I was killing her. Dad yelled at the judge. Court officers had to escort both of them out. It was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Oddly enough, it also felt like freedom. The aftermath came quickly. The extended family split into two sides. Some relatives think I overreacted. Others reached out to apologize because they never realized how serious everything had become. Uncle David shared even more family history with me. Apparently my parents had spent years borrowing money from relatives by telling heartbreaking stories and emotionally manipulating people into helping them. Even my grandmother called me personally for the first time in years. She admitted she'd never actually believed I owned multiple apartment buildings. She'd simply been confused by all the rumors and wondered whether I'd somehow gotten involved in something suspicious. As for the cryptocurrency investment, it turned out to be an obvious scam. Uncle Kevin got caught first. Then he convinced my parents to mortgage their paid-off home and invest alongside him in a get-rich-quick scheme. They lost almost everything. Olivia has changed more than I expected. She's going to therapy now. She's working 2 jobs to support herself. A few weeks ago, she mailed me a long handwritten letter. She apologized for the way she'd acted. She admitted she'd been unbelievably entitled. She acknowledged just how unhealthy our family's dynamic had always been. Most importantly, she didn't ask me for anything. Not money, not help, not even forgiveness. She wrote that, for the first time in her life, she wanted to earn everything herself. I decided to help her, but only in a small way. A friend of mine needed an entry-level marketing assistant. I passed her resume along. She got the job on her own. Not because of me. Because she earned it. We're still not close. Maybe we never will be. But I can honestly respect the fact that she's trying to become a different person. As for my parents, their house was officially foreclosed on last month. They're living with Uncle Kevin now. From what I've heard, they're making his life just as miserable as they made everyone else's. Apparently, he's already started asking other relatives if anyone is willing to take them in. Funny how life works sometimes. Karma really does have a sense of humor. As for me, I still have my apartment. My apartment. I've even redecorated a little. I wanted the place to feel like mine again instead of constantly reminding me of everything that happened. Diane still laughs whenever she sees me. She calls the whole situation the family drama of the century. Therapy is still part of my life. It turns out growing up in a family where love always came with conditions leaves scars that take time to heal. The restraining order remains in effect for 2 years. I haven't heard directly from my parents since the court hearing. I'm sure they're still telling anyone who will listen that I'm the villain. That's okay. The people who truly matter know what really happened. To everyone who followed this story from the beginning, thank you. Your messages helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind. What my family was doing wasn't love. It was abuse. And if anyone reading this is dealing with something similar, please remember one thing. No is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone your success. You don't owe anyone your home. You don't owe anyone your future. Sharing DNA doesn't give people the right to take what you've worked for. As for me, I'm keeping my apartment. I'm protecting my boundaries. And for the first time in my life, I'm finally protecting my peace. Thank you for everything, Reddit. I'm finally free.